Like I'm never one of those people that just fly through life. And why can't I just be just one time, just be one of those people that just get through to the next thing? No, never happened.
Have you ever met someone and thought their job sounded cool? Or perhaps you're wondering how you can get to a position that doesn't seem to match any of the qualifications you have at the moment? Well, if so, this podcast is for you.
We found some people with jobs that you might not necessarily know about or expect people to have, and we're going to ask them about how they got there.
Welcome to What Do They Do? A podcast about jobs and how people got them.
Welcome to today's episode. I'm really delighted to have Loell join me. So without further ado, Loell, welcome to the podcast. What do you do?
Thanks, Ben. I am a founder and a team collaboration coach and workshop facilitator. That's the most concise I can get it down to.
Well, this is the beauty of why we started the podcast, is that if you had a nice, concise way of describing it, then we probably wouldn't have reached out to get you on the podcast. So it's great to have that kind of a bit of this, a bit of that. So if we work through those ones, so founder, maybe we want to start by talking a little about that before we get into the kind of team collaboration piece as well. So the founder role, how did that come about? What does that involve?
Yeah, so my company is called Art of Teams, and I help teams just do their work more effectively. So to become high performing and to get organized, to create ideas better, to work together better in this new digital age. So I mostly work with remote and hybrid teams. And yeah, so that's what I do. I work with a lot of different companies around the world to help their teams get better. So that's my business, and that's what I'm a founder of. And yeah, it does feel like the founder role is completely separate to the actual work I do in my business. So yeah, I'm glad the way that you said it, like, okay, this is separate, which it does feel like it is separate.
Yes, I presume, with founder, there's the fun bits of running a business, financing, and, and all the rest of it. And then, yeah, the working with the teams, I imagine, is the cherry on top when you actually get to focus on working with them. So you mentioned geographically quite widespread, and then sector-wise, do you focus on any particular sectors? You mentioned hybrid and remote, but is that particular sectors that you work with?
No, I don't have a particular sector. It's quite widespread. So anything from telecommunications to charities, not-for-profits. It really does depend on the type of team, but any team that's remote or hybrid, I can work with. So I'm not, limited by sector.
So there were two really interesting things I wanted to maybe dive into a little bit then is, so no particular sector is interesting because maybe there's a perception that as you're going off on your career journey that you have to pick a sector. So working with teams and helping teams work better, obviously teams exist across all sectors. So I suppose, is that the bit that allows you to not necessarily have to niche down into a particular sector?
Absolutely, that's what I'm finding. If I can help one sector to do this stuff, it is applicable to all sectors. And I feel like nowadays as well, people aren't really stuck. When you think about your career trajectory, you're not stuck in one sector. Skills are transferable, so people are now jumping from one industry to the next, but you need the same type of skills to function as a team.
Well, you also, that kind of links into the other thought I was having around working with hybrid and remote. So the future of work is maybe one way of describing it, and whether it was coming anyway or it was definitely accelerated by the pandemic. Lots of people are in that situation of trying to work in a team more spread out in different scenarios. So you must be seeing a lot of that kind of future of work piece play out with the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so accelerated now. And I feel some companies thought that, okay, we can go back to the office and operate as normal. But even those who want to go back to the office, they're forced to operate on the hybrid structure now. So, um, yeah, I think it's here to stay for sure, and the pressures still remain on how do we make this as efficient as possible.
So efficiency there you've mentioned. What are the types of challenges that you're seeing that teams are facing that you're being asked to kind of help them out with?
Yeah, well, I think the challenge that teams feel first, especially since the pandemic, is, whoa, this is not the same as working together face to face. We're missing things like body language and other physical cues that people give off when they're communicating to each other. They're missing out on opportunities to exchange ideas outside of a formal work setting. So water cooler moments, they like to call it, or coffee chat moments where you bond with people, or you start to break down silos between departments as you're grabbing a coffee and figuring out what people are doing and things like that. So the communication piece is a big part of it. And then the next thing that is, I mean, you would think that the biggest piece would be technology, but it's not. It's literally communication, bonding, relationships. That is the piece that people are challenged with mostly.
So how does your work kind of end up manifesting itself with the team? What does it look like when you go in and work with them?
Yeah, so it's a it's an interesting kind of structure. So especially for teams who are new and trying to find their feet, they're coming into the stages of, okay, we're forming as a team, we're learning how to work together, norming and n- figuring out how people are, so different team dynamics. Once a team comes together and they realize, okay, now we need to start working together, is when they will bring me in to help them with the key collaboration skills in a remote or hybrid context. So that if we're talking about if we talk about completely from scratch, like a team who's not used to working like this, the first thing to do would be to run a workshop so that the team is exposed to a new way of working that is completely remote, but they're getting things done. So they're getting that satisfaction of, whoa, we're actually making progress and not doing all the things that we hate in meetings that don't work, like going off on tangents that don't lead anywhere and circling back on the same topic over and over again, things like that. So once they're exposed to that, then they realize, wow, there's some key things in this workshop that I could use in my meetings. So it's picking out those skills that are transferable for them to use in their day-to-day operations and upskilling the team on that. And also ensuring that key pillars of collaboration are developed within the team. How are we communicating? How is our work organized so that it's transparent for everyone who needs to see it? They can easily see it and understand what we're doing. And how many times are we getting together to bond and build that relationship so that we are a strong team? So there are lots of different facets to it, but it definitely works in that order, from exposure to something that looks great remotely, picking out the skills that you could use in your day job and embedding that for the team.
That's right. So that sounds multifaceted in the way that you have to work with them, and but I am sure lots of people listening. I hope lots of people are listening. I'm sure for anyone listening, they can relate to that team dynamic and the struggles. And I imagine many more people are in that position where they are having to do some kind of remote or hybrid work as well. So does that mean that there's a lot of that work out there that you're finding? Is you very busy?
It's interesting because I feel that people are aware of the pain points they're feeling in a team. Like, oh, wow, you know what? This is not working. Um, and it's like pulling your hair out. So you know you have a problem, but you're not sure what the solution is because the problem manifests in so many different ways, and you're normally catching it at the very end. So a good example of this is work that was supposed to be completed at a certain time, but it's late. Then when you ask the team, everybody has a different excuse about why the work is late. And the problem that your senior managers might be feeling, oh, we can't see the work that's being done. We don't know how far gone, that's their problem. They can't see progress. But the team's problem is probably they're overworked and they're not clear on what it is that they need to be working on, or somebody else in another team is not collaborating effectively with them, and so they're getting blockers in their work. So everybody in this ecosystem of people in the company are experiencing the same problem in different ways, and so you don't know what to do. Where do you even start? So that's where it's good to have a collaboration coach come in to help iron that out and pinpoint where the bottlenecks are and what you should work on first. Now, because people don't know about the solution, what tends to happen, what I'm finding is that there's a lot of education to be done. So I have a newsletter, I've got a YouTube channel. I talk to people a lot and try to give them as much information about the problem as possible so they understand, hey, I get your problem. I know what you're going through. And have you tried this? Have a look at this, and just show them what this structure of let's try a workshop. Let's try a workshop. Always go with that. Always leave that. Let's try a workshop. And if they like it, then you don't really have to do anything else because they've now witnessed the power of what good looks like. And so they want more. So it's a challenge because you have to educate people and then really understand what problem they're going through and give them a solution that is easy to digest and is not going to be too problematic or too complicated for the teams to be a part of. So yeah, it's a weird one.
Well, you said, I mean, you've very nicely put it as educate. Some people might be going sales and marketing, right? To make them aware, because that we've got into the coach now. So we've had the founder, the team collaboration, and then you've talked about collaboration coach. And I suppose that's a role that maybe a number of people listening, maybe that's a new role for them. They've not heard of that one before. So I suppose if you don't know it is a thing, everyone knows they're challenged with it as a team. But if you don't know that there's someone out there that can solve it for it, I suppose, yeah, you've got to do that outreach. And actually, we'll put a link to the YouTube channel. And if you've got like a subscribe link to the newsletter, then we can put that in the show notes as well to make sure everyone gets a chance to learn about that too. So with all that then, the founder, the collaboration coach, working with teams, if we so Loell at school, was she thinking, yep, I'm going to help teams work better?
Absolutely not.
No?
No way. Man, the things that I wanted to do as a kid growing up are completely different to where I am now. So I grew up in Jamaica and I moved over to the UK when I was about 15. So maybe just a year before I did my GCSEs. Um, when I was in Jamaica, I wanted to be either a doctor because like my family, like my godparents were doctors and lawyers. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll just be a doctor or a lawyer like everybody else. That's easy. Easy.
Yeah.
7 years of study. Yeah,
Really straightforward.
simple career trajectory. Um, and then I thought, oh, I quite like swimming. Maybe I can be a marine biologist. And then I thought, oh, actually, I quite like planes, so maybe I could be an RAF pilot. That's what I'm going to do because I was always going to move to the UK anyway. So I knew that was an option for me. So yeah, all over the place. So I just did sciences. I was like, I'll just do the sciences and get into that. But I'm not very good at physics. I flunked physics so bad and thought there's no way on earth any university in the world is going to take me with these grades. I just can't do this subject. And yeah, then I just didn't know what I wanted to do after that. Yeah. So that's
Well,
how
then
it started.
the not knowing what you want to do, I feel like that needs to be normalized a little bit more for young people. Like that's normal. It's okay. Like if you're 15, 16 and you don't know what you want to do, to be honest, if you're 35 or 15, and you don't know what you want to do, that's fine too. But yeah, I've spoken to a lot of young people who feel like they need to have an answer to that, and I don't think anyone ever did really, apart from a few kids who maybe sort of decided on one thing early doors. So
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's just so important for people to do what they love, and it's okay to stick to something for a period of time because you'll be surprised how many skills are transferable. Just stick to what you love and do something long enough to get good at it. And if you want to change after that, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I think it does need to be normalized. People are still worried about, oh, what am I going to do now if I'm not sure on where I want to be in 15, 20 years' time? Like, nobody knows.
so when you made that transition from Jamaica over to the UK, I mean, that sounds like a really challenging time to do it at the age of 15, I imagine.
Yeah, it was really tough. I was super depressed for maybe about a year. Just everything was so hard. I mean, my mom's British, but and like half of my family are, but it's still a massive culture shock coming over to a new country and everybody speaks differently. The landscape is completely different. I was lost all the time. I'd never been that cold in my life.
Yeah, I've
Yeah, it
heard
was
that.
tough. Like, where's the sun?
One of our previous guests, Lawrence. I mean, he was born in the UK and grew up here, but he's from a sort of Nigerian family, and he still suffers that in the like, so cold. Where's the heat? I need it. So I've heard of that from a lot of different people who
Yeah.
who have different backgrounds. Are like, this is just not acceptable.
Inhumane.
So with this, so coming over as a teenager to a completely different country with a slightly different climate, did that affect kind of your decision on what you wanted to do and what directions to take? Were there lots of opportunities still available? Like, how did that kind of pan out from GCSE and beyond?
It completely threw me because this is when I realized how important teachers are and teachers that really connect to their students. So I did mostly sciences in Jamaica and I did art. I paint, like that's my painting in the background for if we're using the video thing, one
Yeah,
of.
if you're
But I
listening to an
do,
audio version, switch over to the video now.
yeah. But yeah, I loved painting and just art in general. And that wasn't really something that I wanted to get into because in Jamaica, I never thought of it as a career choice. When I moved over to the UK, I had a really good art teacher um, who was really connected to the subject, and we were able to go a lot deeper in terms of what art meant. So creativity is not just seeing something. And in Jamaica, I was learning the technical aspects of painting. And when I moved over to the UK, it was about emotion and meaning behind the work and the history behind the work. And wow, it just opened up everything for me. And I was really into poetry as well and reading. And my English teachers were really good in the UK. My literature teacher, especially, he was incredible and so connected to his students that loved books. And he encouraged me world without end. And I just got a bigger connection to the arts. So I completely switched from sciences to the arts. And then I wanted to get into architecture because I wanted a way to connect my creativity and problem solving skills because art is, as somebody who practiced art for so long, art is definitely a mixture between science and creativity. You have to know how to mix paints, mix colors. You have to know how to create dimensions in your work. And you also have to connect with people emotionally. And I thought that architecture was the perfect segue for a career into that. And it still kept with the with the long studying, 7 years to be an architect,
Yeah,
7 years to be a doctor or a lawyer. So I'm like, yeah, this is an acceptable career path. So that's what I wanted to do, be an architect. And everything in my being from 15 to maybe 18 was focused on how do I become an architect?
So, in terms of the options you have at school, then I'm presuming that meant maths for A
Yeah.
level,
Yep, maths
because
for A level.
that's kind of one of the requirements. So then you got to presume you got to the point of applying for architecture courses. Um,
Yeah. So I went to college and I did um, maths with mechanics. I did art. I did literature. And I did English language. And I think I was doing a few languages as well. I was studying languages on the side. And yeah, I was applying for schools to do architecture, but I couldn't stand my art teacher in college. She was just not motivating. My maths teacher was terrible. My art teacher was terrible. She had her favorites, and I wasn't one of them. And I just didn't feel any drive to. They made me feel like I couldn't be who I wanted to be and be an architect and go to the schools I wanted to go to. Um, and so I had sent out maybe 3 applications to universities. And then I remember my art teacher saying, "Oh, you'll never get into Cambridge or you'll never get into these schools." And I just, I rescinded all of my applications. And I didn't really know what to do after that. I just felt like my world had collapsed. Um, yeah, so that was really tough. But at that time, I was like, my parents were entrepreneurs. They only worked for themselves. And in Jamaica, I saw lots of that. And I always had like an entrepreneurial spirit, but I was also taught that you need to have a career that is a proper career. Doctor, lawyer, architect. Um, and so I never thought I would study business because that was just too vague. But because I didn't know what to do, and it seemed like all of my friends in that situation, they didn't know what to do either. They just went into business. So I just followed suit and I applied for entrepreneurship courses. And at the time, I had a little jewelry store as a teenager, and I was selling jewelry. And I thought I quite like being an entrepreneur. That's cool. Plus, I don't know what I want to do, and I'll never be an architect now. So I guess I'll just study business.
so interesting the power of teachers in both ends of the spectrum there to both build you up and knock you down. I was a teacher for 13 years, and I'm endlessly troubled by the amount of people that have a story that involves a teacher telling them you won't be able to do that, or you're not capable, or you shouldn't go down that path. I just find that astonishing that it happens so often.
Yeah.
There's this slight like the teacher gene is like, surely maybe they were just trying to motivate, you know, but it sounds too common. So
Mm.
astonishing kind of ability of those people in those positions to kind of have such an impact both one way or the other. Um, so I mean, for anyone that might be, if there's younger listeners at that point, sort of trying to grapple between subjects, or if I put it this way, any advice for 17, 18-year-old Loell that you give now?
Well, wow. I wish that I wasn't so influenced by people telling me what I could or couldn't do. But it was also a different age then, you know? I didn't have YouTube where I could go and find some people who I wanted to be like and mimic them and follow them. And I didn't have anyone who people that were kind of in the role models essentially. They were in the place that I wanted to be, and I had access to them to then create a trajectory for myself. Um, and when I look back at it, like when I look at my friends who, like, they're from a long line of doctors or lawyers or whatever, musicians, music directors, producers, you know, my dad was a director, my mom was as well, and my grandfather or whatever. It just goes in the family. They have somebody to look up to, so they can follow a trajectory. I didn't have that, and a lot of people don't have that. So I guess if I was giving myself, if I could visit my 17-year-old self, I Oh, I guess I would say just choose something and be confident in your choice. And don't worry about if you're not going to be the best, because I feel like for me as a teenager, I was a bit of a perfectionist, and if I wasn't the best in the class at something, then I felt that I could not do that thing. And I feel that teachers sometimes perpetuate that mentality a lot, where they have a favorite in the class who is doing the thing that they always wanted to do, but they can't see the potential for somebody that might not be as good, or they're going in a slightly different direction. I would just tell myself you don't have to be the best to be really good at something. Yeah.
I think that's really solid advice to be taking on if you are a young person in that situation. Um, Also, education measures a very narrow set of skills, and I think too many students probably find themselves in a situation where they don't quite hit those markers, and it doesn't, their ability to empathize, their ability to kind of bring people together, um, and to a large extent the creativity pieces as well get undermined a little bit by some of the other subject areas that are deemed to be, like you say, the proper jobs and proper
Yeah.
trajectories. So yeah, I think that's really nice bit of advice to take on. So with that deviation that you had from moving over to the UK, the teachers, the college, and then going into business and entrepreneurship, where did that kind of take you then over the next few years from college?
Yeah, so when I did entrepreneurship and management, and that was confusing in itself because half this subject was so new at my university. Halfway through, half of the students dropped out to start their own businesses.
I mean, that's success, right?
That's success. I was like, this is a great course. So they pulled that very quickly. Um, but what it taught me was there are options available in whatever you want to do, and you can create something for yourself. So that's what that taught me. But it was still a degree, and I didn't drop out. I finished, I completed, and now it was time to look for a job. And I thought, okay, I need a proper job. What's a proper job? Investment banking.
Of
So it's like,
course.
yeah, I'm gonna be have a business degree. I'm gonna be an investment banker. That's the plan. Um, and then I did a year in finance working for a big corporate, and I hated it so much. I was like, I don't care how much money this pays. This is not something I can go down. And then I was also faced with the not being from a prestigious university. I went to Kingston, investment banking. They want people from Ivy League schools. And I just thought, oh my God, if I knew that the school I go to was far more important than graduating with a first class degree with honors, then I would have put all of my energy in going to an Ivy League school, not doing something that I actually wanted to do, you know? So I felt like a failure then, and that my life was just going to not turn out to be anything because of that choice. And like leaving school, I was applying for all of these jobs, and even though I hated it, I was still applying for investment banking jobs. And then I couldn't get to any of those. And so I flunked all of the tests, the the competency based tests that they make you do, and I failed every single one. I just was not good at that stuff. Operating under that kind of pressure with the clock ticking down, okay, you need to solve this math problem. I just cannot function like that. And so I failed all of those tests and wasted like a year of my life applying for these things. And then I was faced with the whole age thing, like, oh, you graduated college a year ago? Like, you can't be applying for grad schemes now. So yeah, I started to feel like this whole thing and this debt and this 4 years of my life at school was an entire waste of my time. What am I gonna do now? Can I even get a job in McDonald's? Yeah, it was not good. It was not good. But then I had someone reached out to me that knew me. So I was going to Jamaica every year to see my family and stuff. And then I was doing summer jobs in Jamaica at a high school. And then they called me one year and said, "Oh, we have a project management job to implement a software system, and we think that you'll be really good at it, and we want you to come and do that, but you'd have to be here for a year." And I said, "Yes, sign me up because what else am I going to do with my life? Plus, being in Jamaica for a year, no problem, that's fine." So I went to Jamaica and did my first job as a project manager. Yeah.
That's really that. It's interesting, those moments, aren't there, that just sort of take you in a different route. And it sounds then like there's been some barriers along the way, and there's been some challenges along the way of the subjects or the architecture, the realization of that for some people the school matters over the actual knowledge and skills that you bring as a part. I
Yeah.
wonder if that's changing. That's probably a whole different podcast in itself. Actually, Lawrence, who I mentioned earlier, has just launched a community interest company called Just a Guy. So
Oh,
it's Lawrence Tajani, and that's looking at social mobility. So there's I'm a non-executive director in that, and it's we've obviously dived into statistics around social mobility and that piece around the school you went to, and it gets into background, and it gets into a number of different sort of facets of where we come from and where we grew up and things like that. That there's some stark barriers there still
yeah.
around, and that one around the level of degree you get. It's not necessarily just you get a first and you get a step up the ladder ahead of people with a 2-1 or a 2-2.
Mm-hmm.
There are still people who are getting 2-2s from certain backgrounds, certain schools who are getting
Absolutely.
into jobs. So it sounds like you've kind of hit up against that along the way as well.
Yeah, and on top of that, you've got that problem of, is it an Ivy League school or not? But then you also have the problem of, is it a first class degree? But what subjects did you do within that? So because I wanted to do investment banking, I wanted to do accounting. And I remember being on a plane and I got sat next to a stranger and we got to talking because I think it was like a 10-hour flight or something. And he said to me, he's like, "Okay, what are you doing?" And I said, "You know what? I'm going into my final year of university. I'm trying to figure out what subjects to pick. I think I want to get into investment banking, but I'm struggling here. I don't know if I should pick the easy modules where I know I can get a first class degree at the end of it because the modules are easy to me, or if I should choose accounting and subjects like that where the content is going to be specific to the role that I want to do later on." And he said to me, "Absolutely pick the easy stuff because nobody's going to look at the modules." And if I had not been sat next to that stranger and he gave me that advice, I would have chose the accounting modules and I would have probably got a 2-2 from a university that was not an Ivy League university and even be in a deeper slump than I was in. So that's another piece of advice that I give to students at university: choose the things that are going to get you the grade, because no one is going to look at them. Maybe in your first job, they'll look at the modules that you did, but they don't really care about that. People don't look at that. And yeah, it's so confusing.
Uh, yeah, the qualific. Once you get one more qualification on, no one cares about the one before.
Yeah.
So we like I was guilty of this as a teacher, telling kids that, oh, your GCSEs is so important. And then we got to A level, and they got their A levels. It's like, yeah, no one cares about your GCSEs now because you've
Yeah.
done the next one. And then equally, as you go on and do like, yeah, whether it's accountancy or law degrees or things like that, then again, no, actually, there are some companies I've noticed now who are not asking for certain qualifications and applications now. They're starting
Mm.
to move away from that as provide. I don't think they think it provides them with value.
I think the problem is they're realizing the people that they want who are good at, especially for technical jobs and creative jobs. These people have so many options now. They're not going through the traditional route of going to university because, especially when you think about coding, by the time you graduate, whatever you learned is now outdated. So you need somebody who loves to do this and they're part of online groups, online communities where they're constantly upgrading their skills and learning because they're actually interested in it, which is how the whole world should be working, I'm guessing. Because there's so much demand for them, they have to completely scrap that way of hiring and think where they have to now go, the jobs have to go to the people. It's not the other way around.
Well, I mean, the job came to you. The last bit we got to on the journey was the job in Jamaica. So the project management job that came to you. You didn't go searching for that
Yeah.
one. And then so the move back over. If we go back to that, the move back over to Jamaica and the project manager job, which was a year over in Jamaica. Is
Mhm.
that right? Did it remain a year, or did you stay out there for longer?
No, I thought I was going to, they said it would be 6 months to a year. So I had planned to stay there for a year. So when it got extended to the full year, I had left maybe a month after that. So it was a whole year. And while I was out there, I realized, whoa, I love doing this. I love this because it gave me the creative aspect where I had to liaise with people. I had to encourage people to do the things that I wanted them to do. Ethical bribes all over the place to get people to do the stuff that I wanted to do, building relationships with suppliers, with vendors. I was in a high school, so I built relationships with the teachers, the students' parents, and it was just really cool. And I realized, you know what? I love organizing. I love working with people. I love seeing something from the beginning to the end. It feels like I'm running a little mini business. And this kind of career means that every project that I go into will feel like a new job because every project is so different. Why wouldn't I want this? This is my perfect career. I want to now be a project manager.
It's interesting you mentioned the creativity in that as well. Like, I don't think necessarily people would immediately go project manager creativity, but there's lots of opportunities to be creative in different roles that maybe people don't always appreciate.
Yeah, I think you're right because even now, 'cause I did a further crossover that I know that we're gonna get into when I was doing design thinking and things like that. Um, when I speak to people and I tell them, oh, my background is in project management, they think, oh, this person is analytical.
Yes.
Um, but that's not the case because you have to be working with people so much. You have to get deep into psychology and leading from the front, leading from the back, and making things come. Because in a project, nothing goes to plan. Nothing ever goes to plan. Forget what these people say. Things do not go to plan in a project. You now have to think, okay, how do I keep everybody calm and use the resources that we have to make the thing happen that we wanted to happen, or even a better outcome than we thought was even possible. So creativity does exist within it.
So, having discovered this, as you said, perfect job for you, seeing a project through, being able to work with teams and various things, did you then sort of go on a route of being a project manager in a few different scenarios?
Yeah, kind of. Not really, no.
That's good though.
Um,
It's good for the podcast.
yeah. No, I did not go on to be a project manager. Not directly anyway. So back then, what year was it? This was around 2013, 2014. And being as young as I was, fresh out of uni, I couldn't get a job as a project manager that was still too senior. I only got that job in Jamaica because people had worked with me before and they knew I was able to handle that role and they knew I was available because I just graduated. Um, so I had to make a decision on if I was going to stay in Jamaica or move back to the UK. And I decided to move back to the UK because in Jamaica, I think the only things that were available to me was doing a reroute and going back into medicine or doing finance, which I hated. So I moved back to the UK and I was applying to loads of grad schemes. I probably applied to over 200 and I was getting declined left, right, and center because I suck at these tests that you have to do, right? So it got to the point whenever there was a test, I was like, I'm not even applying to that because I know I'm not going to get through. And then I applied for Volkswagen Group's grad scheme. They had no test, thank God. They said, oh, it's open to people who were up to 2 years out of uni. So I had still fallen into that category. And I applied and I got through. They had 12 spaces and something like 2,400 people applied, and I got one of the 12 spots.
Wow,
And so,
that's incredible, isn't it? The amount of people you're up against, that's daunting in itself. So, how did that
yeah,
feel?
I mean, I had gotten so many rejections up to this point. I was just used to being told no. And, but I had no option. I was literally stuck between a rock and a hard place. I had to keep applying. So, yeah, it felt really good. And it felt surreal that they thought I was good enough because now in my head I had thought, okay, I must be stupid not being able to pass these tests if every single job has them. So I can't be good enough for a corporate job because I suck at these tests. And then I started backtracking when I sucked at physics in Jamaica, and then I failed maths in my college in the UK, and yeah, Lowell, you're gonna fail, and you need analytics to move forward. And how do you think you're ever gonna succeed in life if you suck at maths and physics? So the fact that they wanted to, they overlooked that to give me an opportunity to be part of a graduate program, I was like, wow, this is crazy.
How has your attitude to failure changed over time then? Like, do you now value it? Or, I mean, presume, yeah, like, I
Yeah.
suppose my original question, how has your attitude changed to it?
I feel now that failure, I know you hear it all the time and it sounds super fluffy that, oh, behind every failure is a great opportunity. And yeah, I guess so, but it's more of an internal game. All of us are playing an internal game, and everything, the whole world is open to us. All the opportunities in the world, they're open to us, and the only person holding us back is ourselves. And if you have the mentality that no matter how many barriers you have to go through to get to what you want, you are going to go through those barriers, then there are not enough barriers in the world to stop you from getting to where you want to be. Especially if it's a probable thing. It's not like I'm saying, oh, I'm not a US citizen and I'm going to become the next president of the United States, you know? Not something crazy and off the wall like that, but if somebody else like you has done that, then there is no reason why you cannot do it. Yes, you might have to work a bit harder than that person. And at the end, I also realize that people don't talk about their failures, people just talk about their successes. So it creates this illusion that things are easy to get and a certain person can just get it like that, when in fact, they had to go come across so much and overcome so many things to get to where they're at. So that only comes with listening to other people who are more successful than you and people who are honest, who are going to be completely honest with you and keeping tabs on your own failures. So I think that's how my attitude to failure has changed over time. And when I'm interacting with kids, I make sure, like my stepson, my goddaughter, when I talk to them and they're like learning to tie their shoelaces and they're getting frustrated and they can't do it and they're like, I'm never going to be able to do it. Look how quickly you do it. And I say to them, don't worry, you're gonna get it. They eventually get it, but they completely forget about the struggle to get to where they are now. And I always try to document those milestones so that when they face a new challenge, we go back to the emotion of not being able to tie your shoelaces and how impossible that felt. Everything feels impossible when you don't know the next step. And that made me realize that in life, everything is like that. You don't know the next step, and so it feels like there is no way that can happen. So, how I look at failure now is I just don't know the next step, and all I need to do is get to that next step. And looking back at times when I had failed before and tapping into those emotions, it reminds me that, hey, this time is the same as when I couldn't tie my shoelaces.
That's a really nice, sort of manageable way of looking at it, and I think sort of a really nice, succinct way of putting it. So thank you for reflecting on that. And Dean, the co-host of the podcast, has done a few talks related to failure and that attitude, and he didn't take a traditional route into where he works now, and I think it's an interesting one. It's very easy, right, with experience to tell a young person, don't worry about failure, but each one feels so real when it happens. So it's so after all of, well, let's put it in context. After some challenging failures along the way, if you look at it that way, then going into the Volkswagen graduate program, did that unleash you to kind of just and open a load of new opportunities? What was the program like, and kind of was that a springboard after that bit?
Yeah, so Volkswagen's graduate scheme at that point was a 2-year rotation around the business. And at the end of the 2 years, 3 people would be chosen to do a year abroad in a factory. And I had made up my mind at that point in time that I was going to work in Barcelona in the SEAT factory for a year, and I was going to be one of those people. That's what I said to everybody at the beginning. I'm getting on that thing and I'm going to Spain for a year. And people thought I was absolutely ridiculous. But nonetheless, that's what I was working towards. But then going on the grad scheme, rotating around each area of the business, fine. But they had these assessments at each milestone in each role where you had to present to senior leaders in the business, work on projects, and then present your findings. And then they would grade everyone, and the people with the top grades would go abroad. I was not one of those people. Like, my managers were so, like, I look back at them, I'm like, why are you giving me such low grades? Look at these people. I know that I'm better than them, but they're like being extremely critical of the things that I was doing. And I'm like, I know that you're trying to help me, but the goal is to go to Spain. And right now you're not making that happen for me. So I didn't go to Spain. So my heart was so set on it, that I thought, how am I going to do this now? So at the end of the grad scheme, everybody's kind of promised a role at the company. And it was coming up to the end of mine, and I wasn't getting any of the roles that were open. And it was becoming apparent now that I was going to be stuck. Like, I'm never one of those people that just fly through life. And why can't I just be just one time, just be one of those people that just get through to the next thing? No, never happened. So they were like, okay, Loell, you don't have a role. We can put you into this temporary project management role for this brand. It's only 6 months long, and then you need to find a job here. Like, you need to pick something. And I was like, okay, fine. So I did that role for 6 months, but I was so set on Spain. I was like, I need to go to Spain. And I thought, how am I going to get to Spain? So I started networking so hard. I spoke to all of the people in Sayat's brand. I asked them if they knew anybody in the factories. They're like, yeah, we know these people. I emailed them, contacted them, went on holiday to Barcelona to meet these people. And for that maybe 7 months to a year, I was like going back and forth and having conversations. And then one of the managers in Spain messaged me and said, "Oh, we have a role that might be coming up, but it's a temporary contract. You would have to move to Barcelona. You will be working in Spanish, so you're going to have to learn Spanish. And you're a project manager, right? Do you have any project management qualifications?" I had none of that. I was like, "Absolutely, I have all of that stuff." I had
Yes.
nothing. I
Make
was
it
like,
do,
"Oh my
make
God."
it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so I need to learn Spanish, get a project management qualification, and figure out how am I going to move to Spain and take like a 40% salary cut, move to a country where I didn't speak the language. And yeah, so I just did it. I was like, okay, project management qualification, that's the easiest one to get. Got it. Um, was a lot of hard work, waking up at like 4 a.m., studying and all of that stuff, going to work full time. Um, Made my contacts in Spain. My best friend had copied my plan a few months earlier and moved to Barcelona anyway, so I just went and lived with her because she was one of those people who just could just do things just like that. You know what I was saying? Like people have doors open up for them. I wasn't one of those people. She was one of those people. So she's like, "I want to move to Barcelona." And she went like 2 weeks later, got a great job, da da da. I was like, fine. So I moved in with her and I was learning Spanish, got a Spanish tutor, learning Spanish on Duolingo like every day, and then went over there. And then it took about 5 months. I had to save so hard while I was at Volkswagen to be able to afford this, but I saved and didn't do anything for about 8 months. And then I went over there and didn't get my contract signed for another 7 months or so. So I was there without a job, living off my savings depleting. Luckily, it was cheap to live there. And I was just going to Spanish classes every day. I was super stressed because I didn't realize how hard learning a language was going to be. I only speak English and Patois in Jamaica, but learning a language takes a different kind of skill. Your brain has to do things it's not used to doing. And that gave me a lot of anxiety. So the simple things like, okay, I want to go to the market and buy apples. Okay, let me figure out how I say I want these type of apples. Hi, buy, leave. I go there are no apples. This new guy, he sees, it's like, "Oh, you don't live here." Starts speaking to me in Spanish, trying to make conversation. "Are you new?" Like being super friendly. I panic. Like, and that was the everyday stress I had to live with. But I got through it and I got up to an intermediate level speaking Spanish. I got the job. The contract was eventually signed. I was working between Spanish and English, and people were really nice to me. And eventually I got it. And I was there in Spain, working in the factory, speaking Spanish, speaking English, um, kind of living the dream as I had imagined in my mind. But the dream was not as satisfying because it was very hard to do this stuff day in, day out. But I was a project manager there, um, like a full-blown global project manager, managing global projects and doing all of this stuff. So that was my first real job as a qualified project manager. And then looking back at it, I realized that the job I had in Jamaica as a project manager, the job that I had for about 7 months at Volkswagen as a national project manager, and the job I had in Spain as a project manager, the skills that I got from that were exactly what really good project managers do. So I was there in my career working and really, really good at my job, being able to manage global teams, globally dispersed teams, multi languages, just everything, highly technical projects, business projects. But I didn't make sense of any of that until I had to apply to my next job. And then when I started writing these things down, I was like, "Oh my God, I am so good at this." Look at me. I'm like in my late 20s and I've done all of this stuff. This is incredible.
That must be a real moment, particularly where you mentioned you were at, where you felt that you had a not good at the test that people kept pointing for you, and you felt those kind of negative aspects and then actually a moment where you get to write down, look at all the things I can do.
Yeah,
I
it's surreal.
didn't. I don't think we. I mean, I feel a lot of people find it hard to kind of back themselves and realize the skills they have. Um, and actually, I think there's possibly a gender difference in that as well that's been observed, where men might be slightly more likely to over-egg their abilities,
Mm.
whereas in general, women might be a bit more likely to underestimate their abilities. So, I think a nice moment to be able to write them all down and go, yes.
Yeah. And I had to become that person. I had to, because when I found that I was applying to jobs and not getting them, I had read a lot of articles and watched videos of how to make things sound like what the things that you've done sound way sexier than they actually are. And I had to become that person who over egged myself. And then I just kept doing that because I'm like, all of these other people must be doing the same thing because if I have more experience than you and you are here with me in this job, you are doing this far worse than I am. It made me realize that there's nothing wrong if it's still the truth, just make it sound way better. Sprinkle some more adjectives on that and we're good to go.
Well, you see job descriptions out there, and the lists are long, and it's you kind of think, is there anyone with all of these abilities? Like,
No
is it a
one can
wish
do this
list, or is it
stuff.
because it says requirements?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So rub the unicorn horn and they'll magically appear.
So, with all of that, then, so you said applying for jobs at that point, where I kind of took you off on a tangent. So you're pulling it all together and applying for other jobs. So this is after a sort of, as you're project managing from the SEAT point of view, you started applying for other jobs. What kind of jobs were you looking at that point then?
So at this point, I was looking to move back to the UK because this was at the height of Brexit and like they were pressuring me. Are you legal to stay here and work here now? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. I was like, not even the prime minister knows what's happening with Brexit, and you're asking me. So I just wanted to earn more money, and I was like thinking, okay, what kind of lifestyle do I want for myself? I don't want to be flat sharing for the rest of my life, so I need to get another job in Spain or move back to the UK. And I was applying for jobs in Barcelona, but I wasn't really getting anywhere and the pay wasn't what I wanted it to be. And then I thought, oh, but I really want to be remote. This was before remote was really a thing. So I can live in Spain and live on the beach and get paid in pounds.
Yes, get a London
Um,
salary.
I know, but that was not a thing at all. So I was still applying for roles in Barcelona, and my Spanish skills were coming up against me there because where I could toggle between English and Spanish at SEAT, I could not do that with a regional role where it's just okay, you're project managing Spanish projects. That's it. Um, and yeah, I moved back to the UK. And my whole plan was to actually do something completely different. My friend had a recruitment company, and he said, oh, I can show you how to be a recruitment consultant, and then you can work anywhere in the world. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I saved up and I took out a loan and I came to the UK and I was trying to learn recruitment and I had to cold call people and do all of this stuff I wasn't comfortable with. Was a lot of growth in a very short period of time. And I thought I'm going to learn in 4 months and then move back. That didn't happen. I like ran through all of my money, couldn't get any clients. Brexit was proving very difficult for recruitment at that point in time as well. And I thought, oh my God, I need to go back into project management. And so I started applying for project management roles. And then I got a global remote project management role. And I could have moved back to Spain, but I decided to stay in the UK and I was working in that role for maybe about a year. and they started to see that I was doing more than project management. Because by this time, I had worked with so many global teams that I had begun to pick up on things that make teams not work as effectively as possible. Things like, how do they solve problems? How do they make decisions? Are people actually listening to each other? Um, and the projects where the teams were really good at what they did and they were a strong group and had all of the skills that they needed to. It was a very light touch as a project manager. I just needed to come in, get their stats, put it in a spreadsheet, bam, we're done. But for the teams that were chaotic, it was like I was everyone in one. I was their psychologist, I was their team leader, their manager, I was everybody. And it was exhausting. And I'm like, why can't you just be like the other teams? And because I had recognized the things that make teams good, and I started implementing those things slowly in this new job, people started realizing, oh, but Loell's teams are completely different. Look at the type of work they're doing. And when they would ask me, I'm like, yeah, because I give them what they need. And they wanted to replicate this, systemize it, and replicate it across the company. And then I got promoted to head of agile design and facilitation.
Ooh.
And I started studying. I got really interested in, I was like, oh, these problems that they're solving. We get to the end of the project and I realize, okay, nobody's using the thing we just created. Why? And then when you go back, you realize, okay, we didn't speak to the people who would be using the things. We didn't create a prototype. We weren't solving the right problems, asking the right questions. We weren't human centric. And then that made me discover design thinking. And that's when everything changed. I was like, okay, this is how we do the upfront stuff before we even start a project, hand it to a project manager to take it to the end. We need to scope the work properly. We need to run it through a design thinking workshop to make sure that we're solving the right problem for the right people. We need to test it and get feedback on it and then give it to a project manager to run. And I discovered workshopping, design thinking, systems thinking. This whole new world um, came into my career. And now I felt like for me, this was project management still because it's just the first bit before you start the execution phase. But the industry did not see it as that. They saw design thinking and all of that scoping, workshoppy stuff as creative and the project management things as analytic. And I was quite unique because I was crossing the chasm between the two. And a lot of organizations, when I was applying for jobs after that, they either didn't understand it, you're either one or the other, but the big companies, the companies that are really making waves with their new products and services, they could see that and they thought, wow, this is a unicorn because you can do both. And that is how I started understanding my value in the marketplace because I can do both of these things, and that is very rare. And my whole outlook completely changed. If I could make the change in these teams as a project manager, because I can do these two things, what could I do for a company who needed to change their culture so that everybody can work like this? What value could they then bring to the world? Because I can't do everything, but I can help a team get to the place where they're so effective that they deliver their company's vision quicker and more effectively than they ever thought they could do. And then that's how I decided that I wanted to become a freelancer and start my own business and make this possible for more companies. I can have a bigger impact on the world by becoming a founder and maybe taking the initial hit of, oh, there's so much uncertainty here. Um, but that is now my calling because this is where I can have an impact. This is what my purpose can be.
I think that like it's interesting those bits that just drop into place along the way. So you identified like what was making teams work well. And then the missing piece of being user centric and then linking that into the design thinking and onto system thinking. So it's the art of teams. We've now feel like we've come full circle back to where you are now. Is actually there's a bit of SEAT experience in there, and there's a bit of all those bits put together, and presumably you've had to work hard. Like you've talked about at least 2 times you've mentioned having to save hard and having to make big choices along the way. So I think going in and starting your own company, you probably the challenge for some of us, maybe you've been through it in other ways and it's not quite as daunting for you. So now that we're back at this point, I probably, as we start to sort of wrap up towards the end, there's probably 2 things I want to kind of maybe ask, which is firstly, what's the vision for the art of teams and for yourself over the next sort of 3, 4, 5 years? Like, where do you want that to go? And then, the final question I've been
Oh yeah.
I've been up for as well. But let's start first of all with, in terms of the art of teams, where are you hoping to take that over the next few years?
Yeah, so I'm still figuring it out. So you've mentioned that things kind of slot into place as you go along. For me, the most important thing is people, and to get an organization to understand that the biggest asset that they have are their people. And what I want to do is to showcase that with data. So tapping into the insights of your people are communicating with your customers, they're liaising with your customers day in, day out. They know your operational processes like no one else. You can't get somebody external to come in with their know-how of how to do these, like to implement new technology. Okay, let's sprinkle some AI on that or put that in the cloud, things like that. I think it's important to first listen to the people on the ground. So, what I want to do, and my mission is to encourage companies to recognize the value of their employees in improving their systems so that the work of the employees is more effective in delivering value for the customers. And that they're able to also tap into the employees' insights of the customers to build better products and better services for those customers, to empower their teams and their employees with the skills that they need to identify the biggest opportunities, ask the right questions, make the right decisions, solve the problem, and test it, and to do this process in such a way that they're constantly improving their value as an organization to to the people who matter, which are, at the end of the day, it's just the customer and the employee. And as long as you keep doing that iteratively and you have a system for doing that, you will stay at the forefront of your industry. You will continue to innovate, and you'll be able to attract and retain the best people, and your customers will be willing to pay a premium for your products because it is so good. And people are at the heart of that. And I think we say that a lot, but we don't go into it in that detail where it all boils down to the people that you have. The success of your business, it boils down to your people. And that's what the art of teams, the vision for and the mission of art of teams is to empower your teams to do the work that they're great at doing, the work that you hired them to do. And in unlocking that potential from each person and giving them the skill set to do this collaboratively, the leaders of those teams can now, their time is now unlocked to look even further. They're able to look at the strategic vision and to lead the team from the right place. You know that your team is effective, you can now lead them where they need to go, and they will cover that ground far quicker and easier than they had done before. So there's value to be had from everyone. And that's what I want to do on as big a scale as possible, because people talk about digitization. That was another thing. When I was a project manager, I kind of said, oh, I want to be part of digitization. It's the future. But when we look at digitization, it boils down to people at the end of the day, value. And a digital future, you have to have those skill set. You have to have the right mindset. And I want to be part of that for as many industries as possible, for as many teams as possible. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
The passion comes through clearly in that. So I think a lot of people can get behind what, and with the current situation with, whatever the phrasing is around the quiet quitting, or then there's lots of jobs at the moment out there. People are in a strong position to move jobs. So in terms of valuing the people in the organization, it does feel like that's potentially the difference between companies that are going to be really successful over the coming years, is how they can upskill and maintain the people in their organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, obviously, then I probably shouldn't ask the next question, because we don't want to sort of stop the art of teams achieving what you've just talked about. But if you could do anything, and I'm thinking maybe marine biologist back in Jamaica is probably on that list. But if you could do anything, have you got any idea what that would be without there's no test involving getting to it? And don't worry about the skill set you might or might not have.
Wow, if I could do so when you had asked in our like pre-interview before the podcast, when you had asked me this, I thought Ben's trying to stitch me up. There is no way I'm going to be able to answer this question. But now that I've reflected, and I haven't done that ever, reflected in that level of detail, so thank you. I honestly think that if I could do anything, and this might seem a bit weird because I guess it should be related to the art of teams, but in my head it still is. But I don't know if people are going to get that, but I'll explain myself. I feel like the most important thing to do is to unlock creativity in people. And I can give you an example. So I said throughout my time at university and college, and even before that in high school, I was always a big fan of art. What I didn't say was that between A level and thinking about leaving Spain, I had not painted or done anything with art. And I remember going and getting a canvas and buying all the paints and thinking, yes, I'm going to get into it now, back into art. And I couldn't bring myself to make a mark on this white canvas because I thought this canvas is so perfect. Anything I do here is going to make it worse. It's going to destroy the perfection of this blank canvas. And it made me go into my mind a little bit because I'm thinking, this is kind of deep. I think that anything I create is going to be worse than a blank piece of paper. How bad is that? How little do I think of myself? Yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be something, and I am going to get better over time. Um, and I had to really get over that. And it was so hard painting that first canvas, and that painting sucked. It was so bad, so bad. I cannot even I would not even show it to anyone.
But
And that was so tough for me.
do you still
Go
have
on.
it?
It's in Spain somewhere in a warehouse. I do have it still. But it made me realize how as children we create and paint and draw and do all sorts of things. We make all sorts of stuff and there is no judgment on it. But we are now adults with the opportunity to change the world. And the only thing that we can do is to do that, you have to create. But we are now afraid to create. And so there is no change. So if I could do anything in the world, it would be to give everybody the confidence to create and to identify themselves as a creative and to go ahead and create. That I think is the most important thing. And then it will unlock everything else that we want to unlock. So yeah, if I could do anything, it would be that. Get everybody to have creative confidence.
There, if you haven't already read it, there's a book called From What Is to What If. I don't know if you're
Oh, no, I
familiar with
haven't.
that, which
No.
talks about the imagination that we have as a child and how we lose it. And
Wow.
it, through examples, little examples of where adults are unlocking their imagination and creativity more, kind of what's possible, and kind of sets a scene of a possible future if we all tapped into our creativity.
Yeah.
Sounds like you wrote it.
Oh, really? Well, I did. I'm gonna read it now, though.
But yeah, I think that might align deeply with your thinking. I'm really glad I asked it then.
Yeah, same.
As our final question. That was really, really fascinating, and thank you for taking us on that journey. And it seemed to quite neatly, because we started obviously what you're doing, and then obviously through all the different facets of moving countries several times, learning new languages, confronting testing as a barrier to every job, and luckily the realization of that skill set you have and you have built, and taking that and obviously now sharing it through the Art of Teams, and taking that step to be the founder as well. So an absolute delight to have you on. Thank you for joining us, Loell. It's been brilliant. And yeah, hopefully that reflective journey was kind of useful for you as well. But it was really, really enjoyable for me.
It was amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure.